Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at Ironhack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey Engagers, welcome to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And today we have another solo episode, another special episode, as I like to call them every now and then, where we're going to be doing an exercise that I use on my workshops, on my teachings. I use this exercise quite a bit. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insights into that, for free here on the open. Everybody can listen to this podcast and get a little bit of those ideas for your own benefit, for your own practice. And the question today is, if you ever feel like, you have one of those days where you're supposed maybe to do something creative or to create something as a professor, as a teacher, or maybe as a creativity professional, and you're like kind of stuck and you don't know what to do, or maybe you're trying to create a gamified solution and you've never done it. It's like, well, where do I start? How does this game mechanics thing work? How do I go about them? How do I get some ideas? And I do something to get sort of people's creativity rolling, to get people to do starting things, because I do believe, and this, as far as I'm aware, is been pretty researched, that creativity is like a muscle, right? Like any other physical muscles. And it often requires both stretching and warm up, but also exercise to grow and to get better. So today what we're going to do is, I'm going to bring you partially into one of my secrets, so to speak, when creating games, when using your creativity for creating these kinds of things. So I do this. I do this exercise where I create random game mechanics, and the idea is that I'll tell you 3 game mechanics. The idea today is that unlike other episodes, you hit pause, right? You take out a notebook, right? So you can take out the notebook right now. But I will be reading you 3 game mechanics. I'll read them very slowly. I'll read you a very quick explanation of what they're about. You'll hit pause, take maybe 2-3 minutes, right? Write down, what are your ideas? How would you use those game mechanics to create a game? It does not have to be a groundbreaking game. It does not have to be even a good game. It does not need to be an educational game or a marketing. It needs to be a game, all right? If you end up taking it to, I've done this where sometimes some financial professors end up creating a financial game around this but again, very quickly, 2 to 3 minutes. Don't overdo it. 2 to 3 minutes. So again, I will be reading you the 3 game mechanics. Maybe you want to jot them down, write them down in your notebook. Maybe not, I don't know, whatever you want to do. And the idea is that I'm going to give you these game mechanics. And with those game mechanics in your head, you're going to create a game. The idea is that the game incorporates all 3 of these game mechanics. You're going to use other things, other game mechanics, etc. But the idea is that you do incorporate at least these 3. So, do you have your notebook? Are you ready? If you don't, hit pause. Maybe you want to take some notes while I read the game mechanics. So I'm assuming now you are ready, right? So here it goes. Let's do this exercise one time, right? The first game mechanic is remember an increasing number of things. I'll give you an explanation in a second. The other game mechanic is jumping. And the last game mechanic is brawling, all right? So the first one, remember an increasing number of things. The idea of this game mechanic is that it tests the short-term memory of a player, like Simon. You go repeating one thing after another, or these games when people are being introduced, right, that some people do. It's like, you'd say your name and the next person's name, and the next person says your name and the next person and the next person, and so on. That kind of concept, that kind of idea that you're remembering every time a little bit more stuff, right? You're testing your short-term memory. The next one is jumping. Jumping, almost always combined with gravity, right? The player must jump from one platform to another, and typically, of course, try not to fall in that process. Like Mario, one of the biggest classics of all times in video games, right? Mario is jumping from one place to another to get to a certain place, along with some other things that you can get to do as well. But one of the typical examples, and one of the things that Mario is best known for, is for jumping all around the place, right? So that is your second game mechanic. And the third one, brawling. The player's character has several types of attacks, right? So brawling, mostly melee, not range. So things that you do, if you were, sort of fighting, you'd be up close, right? Punching or kicking or using your knee or elbow, whatever that is. But these are not ranged attacks, they're melee. And you use these attacks against one or multiple enemies. Things like Street Fighter, right? The fighting game, people are fighting one next to the other. Double Dragon, that game where you're sort of punching your way around, recently came out as well, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles re-edition. So that's a good reminder as well of brawling. You're fighting close range with your stuff, right? So there you have them, those three game mechanics. Remember an increasing number of things, jumping, and brawling. So now is the moment when you click pause, and for 2 to 3 minutes, you write down your ideas of what a very broad outline of your game would be. Right? See you there. So click pause and see you in a sec. Right, so I'm assuming now you have done your exercise. If you haven't, you can still click pause, do your exercise, do it on your own, get your creativity going with games, all right? And I'm going to give you what would I do, right? The first idea that came to mind for me as a game, right? So the idea is that my concept would be a sort of Mario detective kind of thing, right? So you are jumping, of course, Mario is jumping all around. Now Mario also does every now and then some punches, so some brawling. He has to fight these mushrooms and this and that. So, you kind of are safe in that terrain. The new Mario, the latest 3D Mario, is able to do these things. And then remember an increasing number of things. The idea is that you are in a scenario where you are figuring out stuff, but you have to remember them, right? Because you see that clue, you see that once, and then you connect it to the next clue, and everything starts building up together, right? But you have to remember it. It's up to you to remember that. It could be, for example, it could be a tune that you have to remember. You do it one after another, and that way you test it. And when you do it, a door opens, and then you do another thing, and you have to remember that tune plus the new tune to open another door. You're sort of being a detective, going around picking up clues and stuff so that you can continue advancing. So it's a kind of Mario detective kind of idea. I don't know if that exists. I've never heard of it, but that was the quickest idea that came to my mind. The idea, I don't know if it's an interesting game or not. I don't know if it's the best game. Hopefully, it'll be a multi-million-dollar game that Mario Detective comes out in the future. Kidding. But the idea is that it gets you going, right? It's like, okay, I can do this, right? I can come up with an idea of a game. And at this point, you don't have to worry about technicalities. You don't have to worry about difficulty. You don't have to worry about resources, time, nothing, right? You just get that creative engine, you oil it up a little bit, and it gets going. You're doing sort of a stretching, a warm-up for your mind to get going and do it better. Actually, you know what? Let's do it again, right? Let me give you other 3 game mechanics so that you actually use them to create a game. Again, I'm going to read you the game mechanics, then I'm going to read you the game mechanics explanation one by one. I'm going to repeat the game mechanics. You're going to hit pause. You're going to take 2 to 3 minutes, write down some ideas, right? That's going to be your second outline of a very, very broad generic game, and you'll see how your brain actually gets going, okay? So by now you probably have your notebook ready because you had it for the previous exercise. So let's go. Game mechanics part 2. First game mechanic I'm going to give you, hidden image / where's Waldo, right? It is something very like information overload where, you have all this information and you kind of have to manage too much information and you don't need all the information that's there. But the idea is that the player is looking at a complex scene and you're looking for an item, a clue, a pattern, right? Maybe think back to, I always forget the name of that game, Monkey Island, right? You point and click. You're with your mouse and you're clicking on things. You're finding things on screen, right? That's the kind of thing that could be going on. The idea is that you have this scene, this thing you're seeing, and you have to find stuff inside the screen, all right? That is hidden image, where's Waldo? Second game mechanic, spinning plates, all right? The idea here with this game mechanics is that the player's or attention, the person who's playing, your attention has to be split between multiple simultaneous objectives, right? Many things are going on at the same time. It's the general concept that sometimes happens is that objects need sort of recharging as they deplete at different rates. I don't know if you played, I think the game's name is Diner Dash, where you have sort of several tables. It's like a bar, and you're sort of throwing some plates, to people. So customers are coming in and you throw them a plate. And while they're consuming, they're sort of walking back outside, right? So you want to, everybody, you don't want them to reach you because that's too late. And you want to keep them always sort of getting fed, right? They're all the time you're doing something. Imagine, for example, in the physical world, these people that do sort of literally spinning plates. So you have, they do these devices and they spin them one after the other. Of course, after a few seconds, you need to spin them again. Or spinning balls, the basketballs, right? When these people do this with, 4 or 5, and they're spinning one after another. So every now and then they have to come back and spin them again, right? There's many things going on at the same time, and you need to manage, sort of a management in a way, strategy. And the final game mechanic is called forced constant movement, right? The player cannot stand still at any point. The idea is that the game is always moving. We used Mario as an example before. There's some levels in Mario, especially in the early days, where sort of the game is moving forward. Think of the ones that were sort of in the sky or the ship, right? Where the game was sort of moving forward and you couldn't be left behind. Or if you get trapped, you basically die, right? So you have to continue moving forward. You're not only dodging the bullets and jumping and doing all this, you also have to be careful that the game sort of doesn't eat you, so to speak, right? The end screen. Something like that could also be incorporated into your game. So again, I'm going to repeat the 3 game mechanics that we have for the second exercise. We have hidden image, we have spinning plates, and we have forced constant movement, all right? So now is the time when you hit pause, take a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, write down your ideas, a very broad, very quick outline, and then you come back, click play, and we continue with the episode. All right, so what did you come up with? I'm very curious. I'd really like to know what you came up with. So you can share that with me on Twitter, for example, could be a great place. Or if you're already in our email list, email me back. Take any of the emails that you've received from Professor Game. Email me back. I'd be very curious to know what were your ideas. Again, they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be the best ideas you've ever heard. They just have to be game ideas. All right. So here is what I very quickly came up with in this case. So the idea is that you have these sort of adventure, point and click adventures, right? But the thing is that the screen is constantly moving, right? The screen is constantly moving, so you have to be balancing both moving your character on the right places so it doesn't get sort of eaten up by the screen. It's moving very slowly, but you're also trying to find things throughout the screen. So you have to manage both things. At least you have to be moving the character around and you have to be finding the stuff. Of course, stuff that you don't find is stuff that you lost, right? You cannot continue sometimes above that. So you have to be careful and manage everything at the same time. Again, I don't know if that's the best game. The worst game you have ever heard, I have no idea, and it doesn't really matter. It just got my head going, it got my ideas flowing, and now if I have to sort of focus on something very, very specific, my mind is going to be more primed towards that. I'm going to be more ready towards now sort of receiving that input from the exterior world and having, I have all these ideas sort of bouncing around and I'm like more ready. Same thing that happens when you do sports and you do warm-up and stretching. Think of exactly the same thing, all right? So that's it. That's it for the episode today. This is a relatively quick one. Hopefully it'll be a useful exercise for you. It's been super useful for me and many of my students, many of my workshop participants have done this and, it sort of gets you going again. And right now, don't ask yourself, what does this have to do with the game that I'm looking towards building or the gamification experience? Forget about that for a second. The idea is to get your mind going and to get a little bit familiarized with incorporating game mechanics into a certain setting, basically, all right? If you want more details of this, how do we do this? Where do we grab all these things from? Be sure to sign into our newsletter at professorgame.com/subscribe, where I'll be hopefully very, very soon letting you know about what are the next steps for Professor Game, because maybe we will be able to do something together, maybe some form of a course or coaching. That is something that is coming. This is the first time I think that I'm actually saying this on the podcast. So very exciting times are hopefully up ahead. The idea is that we are going to be creating that in the future. And this is just a small part of that, but that hopefully will be useful right now, today, to you to get your ideas, to get your excitement going for games and gamification. So again, remember to subscribe, professorgame.com/subscribe. There you'll be signed up to our newsletter, which I'll be hopefully reactivating. If you've been there already for a while, you know I haven't written emails lately. I hope to be reactivating that very soon and to be providing even further value to you through the newsletter. And remember, before you go on to your next mission, before you click continue, remember to subscribe or follow, whatever that looks like, on your favorite podcasting app, and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.